Am I supposed to press go live? Oh.
I'm talking Joe podcast, minds in motion. Talk about relationships, help your emotions. Behavior management when your kids start to losing it. Talk about life and all the confusion. Minds in motion. Minds in motion. Talk about relationships. I'm talking Joe podcast, minds in motion. Talk about relationships, help your emotions. Behavior management when your kids start to losing it. Talk about life and all the confusion. Minds in motion. Minds in motion. Talk about relationships. Emotion. Minds in motion. Talk about relationships.
Good evening and welcome to Minds in Motion, not Ocean, Motion, with me, your host, Jewel. Thank you for tuning in. We are live on TDN TV, Network One, YouTube, and Facebook tonight. We are going to be live on TDN Radio and TDN on Roku V Streams. Thank you all for tuning in. We're also on YouTube on Minds in Motion on my page. So for viewers, you are welcome to text me throughout the show. I have a text number. It's going to be area code 647-495-3224. Before I get into the show, I just wanted to just recap from my first episode with Shana McCullough. And I just wanted to highlight that this week, while she was on our show, she talked about doing an interview and doing a documentary on Find Ontario Missing Boys. I just want to take a few moments just to talk about that and the seriousness of that. The documentary is coming out this Friday on CBC TV. And it's also going to be on YouTube on Thursday. In Toronto, Brandon Gomes has covered the story. He is a news reporter, journalist. And Shana McCullough is a radio host and also the founder of Find Ontario Missing Boys. So just want you to try and tune in to that episode on YouTube on Thursday or on CBC TV on Friday night. That is a Canadian broadcast. But I'm sure you can find it if you're in the States or if you're in the Caribbean. You can also find it if you have the box. Okay. So this evening, I've chosen to talk about ADHD. What is ADHD? So ADHD, even without the hyperactivity, is an inability to focus, right? So a lot of the students that I work with have that inability to focus and focus their attention on a particular thing that they're doing at any given time. Sometimes they find it difficult to sit still and they're easily distracted. They find themselves getting into trouble. And I'm here to give you some strategies on how to manage those behaviors. So whether you're an educator, whether you're a caregiver, a parent that's struggling with what do I do next, I am here to give you some strategies. Not all strategies work for all, but they might work for some. So if you have any questions, as I said, you can call in. Feel free to not call in, text the number 647 area code 1. Start with 1 if you're not in Canada, or if you're in another province, you're starting with 1-647-495-3224. All right. There it is across the screen. Thank you so much. All right. So when I work in, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a profile of the student that are the different types of students that have ADHD and what I have observed, and different scenarios, because, with Minds in Motion, you're going to get real strategies, real talk, and real situations. So I'm going to give you a profile of some students that I work with. So student A would walk into the school setting and be ready to go to school, right? Students don't come in to school. They don't wake up in the morning saying, I'm going to give some trouble today. They don't come into school thinking, I want to do bad or I want to give trouble. They actually genuinely want to come to school and do well. And it's an inability. They're not able to focus. So when they get to school, they're gung-ho, they're ready to go to school. And then what happens? They hit the door into the school, and there's students everywhere. It's almost, sometimes it can be perceived as chaotic. Kids are greeting other kids, and right away it starts. And maybe it starts from the playground where the student is having distractions from their friends, other people talking, because it's hard for them to focus in on one situation. In their heads, there's lots of things happening. So we tend to want to blame the child and say, you know what, they're distracted. Yes, they are distracted. And it's because they have the inability. They're not able to do it, right? And what can we do? So I'm going to be giving some strategies a little bit later on in the show of how we, as the adults in their lives, can give them some strategies. Okay? Sometimes they have difficulties following instructions or directions, and they may need lists. So as an educator, I'm just going to talk about some things that you can do in the classroom setting, first and foremost. And then these things can definitely be transferred over to the home life. So in the classroom setting, I think it's important to post schedules. Everything should be predictable. There should be nothing that's a secret. If there's going to be change in the schedule, that the student is fully aware that this is going to happen. And then they are told ahead of time. So for example, if the teacher, if you're an educator and you're going to be away, let the parent know or let the child know, right? So at least they're set up for success. They come in and they don't see their teacher. There's a break in their routine right away. They say, where's my teacher? I can't function today. Things are not going to go well, and they're already thinking negative because their regular teacher is not there, right? So let them know. Let them know if they're not going to be, if you're not going to be there. And if there's a change in the schedule, for example, if they're supposed to go to gym and the gym's being used or it's under construction, let them know today we're not going to be going to gym. Gym is not happening. Okay. And that will ease their mind and let them know that in the routine, that's going to be changed, right? Provide folders. So some students, a lot of students with ADHD tend to have problems or issues with organization. Organization skills are top tier for them. They don't have that ability, right? So give them a folder, a binder that has the tabs on it with each subject, so they can place those things into the binder or the folder to keep them organized for the day, right? And sometimes they might need a little checklist to say, okay, well, I just finished science class, so I'm going to check off I did science, I checked off that I did math, and now it's recess time. When they come back in, you might want to give them a reminder that they need to check their binder to see that they did everything that they needed to do, right? So step-by-step guidance and a schedule that way. But even when, as an educator, even when you're giving instructions for an assignment or classwork, you're giving them in small doses, right? We call it chunking. So you're going to give the work to the student in chunks, right? You don't want to present them with a whole page of things they're going to say, when am I going to get this done? When am I ever going to get this done, right? So they're going to see it as an impossible task, which we know that they're capable of doing, but we need to give them in increments, smaller chunks of work, right? Use phrases that get their attention and like saying, this is important because, and then that way they might sit up in their chairs and pay attention more to what's being said, right? Give directions to the assignment, as I said, out loud. So say them out loud. Don't have them written per se, because the information in the text, again, might be too much for them. So you want to say it out loud, but also have it in written form. So if it goes home, the parents will know that this is what has to be done. So it's not just said to them, that is, the instructions are also given to them orally, right? Simple things when you're speaking, giving directions, you're not rambling on. So I tend to, when I'm working with students, I tend to stop and say, did you understand what I said? Do you need me to clarify? And I try to speak slowly and in a pace where it's understandable, right? And sometimes when I'm talking to students that have ADHD, I write things down, okay? I write things down and then I give them, I say, this is what our conversation was about. And I give them a piece of paper to say, this is what we talked about, right? Frequent check-ins is something that is important as well when you're working with students with ADHD or with your kids, right? Let me focus more on students first, okay? I don't want to go into the parents just yet, working with parents and caregivers. So as an educator, like myself, I'm a child and youth care practitioner. I check in with my students on a daily basis. So some students need more effort for you to check in with them. They might need you to literally go up to them and say, hey, how you doing today? Did you have breakfast? How was your morning? Did you sleep at night? This is something I encourage you to do with all of your students, but especially these students that need the check-in, right? Check in with them. You want to also offer them opportunities to use resources in the school, right? So sometimes the computers they're equipped with programs that can do speech to text, right? So if they're reading, they may want the text to be read to them, but they're reading along with it, right? And that is just for them to do it at their own pace. They can take their time to read and reread, right? And sometimes even as adults, even as people that don't have ADHD, we tend to want to reread documents. So why not give it to them and have them reread the documents as well at their own pace? All right. When you're introducing key concepts to students with ADHD, you want to highlight new words, new ideas, right? New words and new ideas. I'm just checking my phone to make sure that there aren't any texts. Let me go through. All right, nothing there. But feel free to send in your texts, as I said, right? I'm going to slow it down a little bit and scale back and just talk about a situation that happened the other day with a student that was trying to advocate for themselves. And this student has ADHD. And the student, I was asked to go and work in the classroom with the student. So I took the student with me down to the classroom. And as I was walking with him, I was asking, what's happening in the classroom? Like, why is it that you don't want to be there? Because he said, I don't want to be in the classroom. And I said, why is it that you don't want to be in the class? Tell me what's going on. And he said, I can't focus. It's too distracting. And every time I try to focus, I feel like I'm eavesdropping on someone else's conversation. So sure enough, I get down to the classroom with the student and it's chaotic. Chaotic in a sense that learning's happening. So we're hearing voices, many voices talking at the same time. There were several different adults supporting that classroom. So there's a lot of chatter happening, a lot of side conversations happening. And I just walked up to the teacher and I just whispered to her, he said, okay, if I take him out? And she said, yes. And as we're going out, she said, okay, I want to explain to him what the work that he needs to do. And I said, okay. So we stood at the door and I said, Miss, so-and-so would like to let you know that it's kind of loud in here and he's finding it difficult to focus. And he's saying that, and then I said, I'm not going to speak for you. Tell your teacher what you're experiencing. And then he said, Miss, I feel like I'm listening into other people's conversations. I'm eavesdropping on other people's conversations and I can't focus. And then she proceeds to say, okay. I said, well, that's part of his ADHD. And she's like, okay, well, when he was running around the school earlier, that was not ADHD. That I'm not buying that. And I said, actually it is, but we'll talk about that later, right? So I didn't want to get into that conversation or that battle with the teacher in the moment, but I often find myself being that advocate for teachers, right? Being that advocate for people who want to tell their teacher how they're feeling, right? And I find that teachers often don't believe it because it's not something that is, it just presents itself as sometimes as pure behavior ADHD, right? So I was going through some things as for instruction, and I thought to just scale back and just talk about like real situations. It comes across as pure behavior. And it's not that the child wants to be behavioral, it's they really can't focus. They're being easily distracted. And so you want to give that student an opportunity to advocate for themselves and say, you know what, miss or sir, I need to go to another place in the school, or maybe have noise reduction headphones, right? Noise reduction headphones will allow that student to focus more on what they need to do. Okay. So I have a question that just came across. It's, how does one know a teacher? How does one know to tell the teacher to check for ADHD? So sometimes you're making comparisons. It's obvious sometimes that one child is behaving in a manner that's more acceptable or according to the code of conduct of the school board, and the other child is like breaking all the rules. They're defiant, they're not focusing, they're often out of class. That's what I'm seeing, and that's what's been happening, and that's what presents in an ADHD child. And they always get phone calls sent home to the parents. So the teacher might want to say, there's something different about this child, and not just assume that it's, let me tell you, behavior always has a purpose. There's always a reason for the behavior. Behavior is not just a child gets up in the morning and just decides I want to misbehave. It is because the child is trying to give you a message or tell you a message. All right. So what signs to look for? So what you're looking for is that child who, as soon as the class starts, the child, maybe like 2 minutes in or 5 minutes in, the child has to go to the washroom. Okay. So let me retract a little bit about those behaviors that the teacher's seeing. The teacher now then has the obligation to bring the child up to a meeting, a team meeting, a school meeting with other teachers that the one child might have. So sometimes they may have 2-3 teachers and the principal. So they would meet together, discuss, there's something different about this child. We need to bring them up to a meeting and discuss what we're seeing. And maybe that child goes home with a Dear Doctor's letter, right? A Dear Doctor letter, if that's what we call it. And it will describe all of the behaviors that the teacher is seeing in order for the doctor to diagnose the ADHD. Now, I'll tell you this. ADHD in very young children, doctors don't like to diagnose. So if they're like 3, 2, 3, I'm talking kindergarten now, and I'm talking like preschool or like daycare, they don't like to diagnose until the child is at least in the 3rd grade. Okay? They don't like to diagnose unless the child is at least in the 3rd grade, 2nd to 3rd grade. Why? Because children are still developing. They're still developing. Their brain is developing. They're learning to socialize when they first enter school. And a lot of, well, in Ontario anyways, the curriculum is play-based learning. So a lot of the learning is through play, right? So they play a lot. And they find that the behaviors change as they grow older. So I'm seeing a lot of questions come in. Thank you so much, Sophia Waterman, for these questions that are coming in from YouTube. What are the signs to look for? So I was just saying, so some of the things would be following directions, blurting out in class, right? Running around in class, skipping class, not being in class when they should be, right? These are things that they're avoiding because they can't focus on the work, and they're not articulate enough to say, I'm distracted because I can't focus. There's too much things going on. Why can't we focus as people who don't have ADHD? Sometimes we're hearing things going on. You might hear a pen clicking and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't focus on what's happening here. But in the ADHD brain, there's so many things happening that they really, really can't focus. So they choose to escape, or behaviors start to show up where they're getting angry with people, and they might yell out, shut up, across the room, right? Or other words, colorful words, right? There was a question, I'll come back to that. There was a question, do you find that more Black kids are being diagnosed with ADHD? I would say yes, from my experience. A lot of Black students are being diagnosed for ADHD. Not just Black students, I would say boys in general. Okay, boys in general are being diagnosed more and more with ADHD because they're more rambunctious. They have a difficult time sitting still, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they have ADHD. Sometimes they just might have a very rambunctious personality, and they are boys, and sometimes they like to roughhouse, right? But that's where you're going to go to the doctor. To rule things out, you go to the doctor and you get a diagnosis. And as I said, doctors don't tend to want to give a diagnosis until the child is at least in grade 3. Because the child is still developing, still learning, and their personality changes as they mature, right? What is ADHD? ADHD is in the brain. So it is a mental disorder, right? It's a deficit, I should say, not a disorder. It's a deficit. So it doesn't mean that they cannot learn. It means that they have to focus more on their learning, right? Focus more on whatever they're doing. So that's why when I was listing out some things that the teacher can do in their environment to make it easier for them. So post schedules, make daily routines, stick to those routines. If you're deviating from the routine, then you want to let the student know that you're deviating from those routines, right? Going back to the diagnosis and how that happens, it's sometimes can be biological. It sometimes can be hereditary. It's not the parent's fault. I want people to know that if they have a child that has ADHD, it's not your fault. You're not taking ownership of this, even though it could be in your DNA and genes. It's only because sometimes it could be of whatever traumas that your child has experienced throughout, maybe through birth or through the way that they were raised in the environment that they were raised in, right? So ADHD tends to arise, right, from unidentified reasons, okay? All right. I see a question here. Do you think that sometimes a child might be ignored by a teacher, so the child is seeking attention? Yes. Yes. So this may be the ADHD child. Yes, that they're being ignored. ADHD children are very, very, very bright students. And sometimes it comes out in behavior and they need to be challenged more. And a lot of children that have ADHD are those gifted children because they're creative. They see things differently from other people, right? They have warm hearts. They're innovative. They have a good sense of humor. These kids are very, very popular kids. And if you listen to comedians, a lot of comedians talk about, when I was a kid, I used to get myself in big trouble. Or, you hear the actors and they talk about, I used to be in trouble a lot in school, because they're creative. They're creative. And sometimes because in the school system, it is a system, and exactly the word for itself is system. It's a systematic problem where the kids are supposed to be doing the same thing at the same time, right? So we now, as educators, have to, for me anyways, I always encourage parents to do extracurricular activities outside of school. So they're not just going to be in a routine of learning the way that all the other kids learn in school, but they're also learning to be on a team. They're learning different expectations. They're learning different routines. They are using their creative abilities and they're getting out their rambunctiousness, if you want to call it that, in sports, right? Going back to the question of being ignored, yes, sometimes these students feel like they're being ignored, or they are ignored by teachers because, oh my gosh, I'm going to say it, little Johnny is always giving trouble. And the teacher's like, I really don't like little Johnny anymore, and I'm not going to answer his question. Believe it or not, there are teachers that formulate a dislike for students that give trouble, right? Instead of trying to find out what the issue is, sometimes educators find it hard to build relationship and they blame the student instead of finding out what the issue is, okay? And even so, when they find out the issues, they still tend to not treat the child or service the child the way that they should, according to the strategies, right? So being on the behavior team, I used to be on the behavior team for a very long time at the board. We offer strategies and recommendations to teachers and build capacity with those teachers. So my job used to be where I'd go into the classroom and observe what's happening first before I can give a recommendation or offer a strategy, right? If strategies are not being used, like the ones I started to list out prior, if those strategies are not being used, the behaviors tend to increase, right? And it becomes where the child decreases in education. So they're not getting the work done because they're not in the classroom. They're failing their work because they're not there in the classroom to focus and pay attention, right? I'm gonna quickly just put in there that medication sometimes helps, not all the time, right? But if a child is taught strategies, sometimes that can help as well, right? I am not a medical professional, so I can't diagnose ADHD and I cannot recommend medication, but I can say, you know what? It does work for some, not for all, right? And what the medication really does is it doesn't change the personality, but it changes the way that the child operates. Okay, so I'm going to take a little break. We're at the halfway point of our show. We're just going to take a little break, go to a commercial, and I'm going to show you a video about ADHD, the ADHD brain, and we'll come back and talk about it.
I'm talking Joe Podcast, minds in motion. Talk about relationships, help your emotions.
Presented by.
Running a radio station shouldn't be chaos. It should be simple, smart, and professional. With Joan Premium, your entire week schedule is beautifully organized and easy to manage. Real-time accuracy keeps your listeners in sync with every show. Your visitors and audience sees the right schedule every time, wherever they are. They can even choose different time zones. From analytics to social media and native app integration, Joan Premium is the professional tool your station deserves. You're never alone. We provide priority support for active license users. We're building a community. Connect with broadcasters worldwide through our Joan Community Hubs. Choose your plan, annual flexibility, or lifetime freedom. Get Joan Premium today. www.gndenterprisesinc.com or call 877-698-9894 for more information.
We all have ADHD, and we're going to tell you a bit about it. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder.
Did you know that anyone can have ADHD, even adults? About 1 in 20 children have ADHD, which is more than 1 in every class. Someone in your family may even have it too.
If you have ADHD, you might feel like you have a lot more energy than others, find it hard to pay attention, get distracted easily, find it hard to sit still, or not shout out or interrupt others.
Lots of people feel like this sometimes, but for someone with ADHD, it might feel like this most or all of the time. This can't get in the way of doing important things, like in school with homework and friendships. This can sometimes get them into trouble more than others.
Not everyone with ADHD has the same difficulties. ADHD can appear in different ways at different times for different people. That's why sometimes it's hard to tell who has it.
Some people may also have difficulties with reading, spelling, or being clumsy. Some may have difficulties communicating with people or have bigger emotions than others, like feeling more worried, sad, or angry.
Scientists have found that the brains of people with ADHD can work in a special way, including parts of the brain that help with things like attention, stopping and waiting before doing things, and organising thoughts or actions.
For me, ADHD feels like you're watching TV, listening to music, and talking to someone all at the same time. It's really hard to know what to pay attention to.
A special doctor can tell if you have ADHD. They will speak to you, your family, and your teachers to find out more about you and think very carefully before deciding if somebody has ADHD or not. They will also talk about the type of help you might need.
Knowing that you have ADHD can help you and others understand you better. You might need help with things that you find hard, and that's okay. It's important to find out what these are and talk to your family, teacher, or doctor about it.
There are some things that you might be able to do to help yourself with support of your family and teachers. For example, taking breaks or having a chart of what you need to do can help some people. Eating well, trying to get a good night's sleep, and getting regular exercise is important too.
Some children with ADHD need medicine to help with their difficulties, and some do not. Not everything works for everyone, and nothing works all the time, so it's best to find things that suit you and that you enjoy too.
Scientists don't know what exactly causes ADHD yet, but they know that it's complicated, with lots of different things acting together, including genes, which are instruction manuals in our bodies that help make us who we are, and the environment, which are the different things that happen to us in our lives.
Although it can be hard sometimes, there are some good things about ADHD. It doesn't stop people from achieving their dreams and being successful. Lots of famous people, like some athletes and actors, have ADHD too. In fact,
ADHD helps me have amazing ideas.
I'm one of the funniest kids in school. I have lots more energy than others.
I have fun in everything I do.
I can think of more questions to ask teachers than any other person in my class.
ADHD is just one part of who you are, and it's okay to have ADHD.
Find out more about ADHD by going to ncmh.info/ADHD.
Okay, and welcome back. That was a very, very informative video about ADHD. I want to again thank you all for tuning in on TikTok. I just turned on my TikTok during the video. So we're on TikTok Live, we're on YouTube and Facebook, TDN TV Network 1. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we're on TDN Radio Live as well as Roku. So coming back, I hope you enjoyed the video that was just played, and it explained a lot about what the ADHD brain is like, right? So those were children describing their ADHD, but adults also have ADHD and tend to struggle with the same kinds of issues with focus and not being able to, maybe they're hearing different things going all at the same time. So the young girl described having her ADHD brain is like listening to TV and listening to TV, listening to the radio, and riding a bike maybe at the same time. Like doing so many things at the same time is distracting for her. Okay. So thank you for those questions. I did answer them earlier. Appreciate everyone who sent in questions on YouTube. And also that phone number is there for you. That number, again, is 647. You can text that number if you'd like to ask a question. Right now, I'm on TikTok Live. So if you do text, I may have to change the screen and then come back. The number is 1-647-495-3224. Text that number and I will answer your questions about ADHD. All right. So some of the things that were described in the video are things that I described already about ADHD, but I'm going to highlight a few other things. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit to the caring adults that are in the lives of students or children with ADHD, right? Let's focus more on the home front. And it's interchangeable, right? So this student or this child that you have is always losing stuff. So picture this. I live in Ontario, Canada, and it's winter. And you give your kids gloves. You give your kids some gloves and you say, don't lose these or else you won't have another pair to wear tomorrow. They go to school and they tend to lose their things. They lose their gloves. They lose their hats. I've come across coats as well. How does one lose a coat in the winter? I don't know, but it's the ADHD brain. They just misplace things. They don't know where to find them. And then they have trouble finishing things, right? So students or children with ADHD have trouble finishing things. So sometimes they may come across as lazy. You might say, oh, that child's lazy because they're not finishing their work or they're not finishing their tasks that they need to do if it's at home, okay? It's not lazy. It's just that there's so many things that they're trying to focus on one thing for too long. It's just too much. So like we just did in the show, we gave you a break. So a break from listening to my voice for a few minutes. That's what we tend to do or need to do in the home environment and also at school. We need to give the brain a break. You see? Brain break. Right? Our minds are always in motion, as my show is called, Minds in Motion, and we need to give ourselves a break and come back to an activity, right? So that's why we have breaks at work, right? There's a purpose for it. We got breaks at work. So most of us, if we're working, we tend to have a 15-minute break, maybe 2 15-minute breaks and a half an hour break, right? So at my work environment, I have 2 15-minute breaks and I have a half an hour break. And that gives my brain some time to have a break. Although I believe I have undiagnosed ADHD because I'm still working on my break. I'm still doing things, still want to keep going. And then kids and adults with ADHD tend to, when they crash, they have big crashes, right? Because they're always going, they're like their mind is always moving, right? So they might have physical complications. You might hear them say, oh, I have a headache. And you're thinking, yeah, son, daughter, you're having a headache because you don't want to go to work. You don't want to go to school today, right? It's not that. It's just their brain needs a break, right? That's a physical thing that happens with them, right? Even eating could be an issue for them. Eating in public, they may feel anxious about eating because maybe the way they eat, they might eat really quickly as well because they tend to do things like that, right? And they fidget a lot. I fidget with my pen. I click it. Sometimes when I have it in my hand as I'm doing the show right now. So I'm moving the pen in my hand. That's as a fidget for myself. If I go to a meeting, I tend to want to doodle or write. I do that. There's a question here. So I think it came in during the break. I heard a psychologist say once before, be careful of having your children be labeled just because she was labeled. It could be, I tend to want to turn that negative into a positive, right? So if your child is being labeled with ADHD, at least the school would know that your child has ADHD and then they would service your child accordingly. There will be a plan. So myself, working in the school environment, I will come up with a plan for the student that has ADHD, right? And then teachers will they should be taking more favor and interest into that child that has ADHD, right? So labels aren't necessarily negative. They can be positive, right? And that label will go to them. So if it's junior school or elementary school, that label will go with them to their high school. And what happens then is that when they get to high school or planning for high school, which is happening right now for a lot of students that I'm working with, they're planning for high school and they tend to, in that plan, they'll say, okay, their pathway to high school will be, these are the courses they're going to take. And one of those courses in Ontario is called GLE. So General Learning Strategies or General Learning Strategies is what they do in that classroom. So they'll learn these things, right? Note-taking, they'll learn how to organize themselves, and that will help them be better students, right? Those things. Some emotional things that you might notice with, so somebody was asking about signs of ADHD, some emotional things that you might notice with young people who have ADHD is they cry often. They become cranky and angry for no clear reason at all. But there's always a trigger. There's also always something that triggers the behavior and makes them want to behave in a certain way, right? You may not know what the trigger is. And it could be something as simple as the trigger may be they were spoken to in a negative way by a previous teacher or by their parent when they were asked to do a task. So now you're asking them to do that task. I can give you an example. When I was working with one student, I did a countdown with him, and he was like holding his head. Oh, no, stop counting down. I hate the countdown, is what he said. And with ADHD, you sometimes have to give countdowns, but it was used in a punitive way, right? So the parent said, if you don't do this in 5 seconds, you're going to be consequence. And they were consequence, and that parent needed to follow through. And I think also adults in their lives, whether it's in school or at home, need to follow through on when you say you're going to do something, do it. So that was a trigger for that kid when he heard the countdown. He was like, no, I hate countdowns. But you need to sometimes use countdowns and follow through, as I said, okay? Kids with ADHD oftentimes can't take criticism. They cannot take criticism because sometimes they've been told so many times that they can't do things well or they're not good enough, right? So they tend to not want to perform and to show adults what they can do because they've been criticized for things that they do, right? They doubt their skills and ability, right? For no reason. They may have panic attacks. So these are all emotional signs. So Sophia was asking earlier, what are some signs that you see to know that the child has ADHD? There's a lot of signs, and everyone that has ADHD is different, right? So you're going to see different types of signs in people, in kids that have ADHD, right? They worry about things of the future. Oh my gosh, my mom's going to get mad at me when I get home. And they're perseverating and they're saying, am I having a good day? Am I having a good day because I'm thinking about what my mom's going to think or my dad's going to think when I get home. So they're perseverating on something that's not even happening in the present. And that tends to keep them distracted, right? So behavioral things. So we talked about some behavioral things as well. And sometimes they avoid wanting to participate in class. They stay silent or they're preoccupied doing something else and like focus. So what I do when I'm walking around the classroom, I don't want to embarrass students. So I tend to do proximity. And proximity means that you're closer to the student. You just kind of walk over to the student and maybe place your hand on the desk just to let them know I'm paying attention and give them the look. I'm paying attention to you. I see you. And right now you're being distracting, right? Or I might just gesture, put it away. I might not say it loud. I'll just gesture, put it away, okay? A question. This doctor said that the work in class was a bit boring. Okay, the doctor who said that they were labeled, they said the work was a bit boring and she will finish the work really fast and then start walking around the classroom. Yes, sometimes the classwork can be boring. Yes. So if you're an educator, I would encourage you to take note, observe. If your kids are constantly walking out of the classroom, they are finishing the work really fast, or they're straight up telling you, Miss, this is boring, or Sir, this is boring. Take note, okay, and try to do something outside of the box. And there's something called Pinterest. If you don't know about it, discover it. It is amazing. Pinterest can help you build your whole classroom. There's so many things on there. In Canada, I don't know if it's probably in the States as well. It's something called Teachers Pay Teachers. It's They have free resources on there, but they also have some paid resources on there where you can go on and get some resources to teach your class. So if you're looking for something on science to make it fun, they'll have an activity to make it fun. You want to make learning fun all the time. Learning has to be fun. It cannot be boring because kids will check out, especially nowadays children. Our students that we have in school nowadays will check out because things happen so quickly for them. They're in the coding age, the video game age. They're very much instant gratification, right? And that brings me to the last point that I'm going to make for tonight about rewards, right? You want to praise a student that has ADHD. Any student, and in general, you want to praise that student and make sure that you're giving them a reward for doing something right. And a lot of people are not in agreement with this, but think about how the scientists reward the mouse for doing something great in the experiment. It is proven in research that if someone is rewarded for something good that they do, then they will more likely perform for that again. So look at us as adults. So we go to work every day. Why? Because we know that we're going to get a paycheck, right? We know that we're going to get a paycheck at the end of the week or bi-weekly. We are working for that paycheck. That's our incentive to go to work and to do something and to perform. So for the student, for them to have an incentive to work and perform, you want to give them something. So for example, I have a student that loves basketball. So what I did was develop an incentive chart for her and for a few students actually. And I created a basketball image, and then I made like little basketballs. And every time I gave her increments. So every 20 minutes of the day, she can earn, or every period of the day, which is like 40, 45 minutes, maybe 55 minutes, she can earn a basketball as long as she did follow the expectations. So for example, if one of her ADHD behaviors is that she's leaving the class too often and she's leaving without permission. So her goal is to ask for permission. Ask for permission. If she asks for permission every period to leave that room, to take her own break, to give her a brain break, if she asks for permission, she earns that basketball every time, every single time. And when she earns at least 5 basketballs for the day, she gets to play basketball with me at the end of the day. Okay. And you can use that for anything. It could be Pokemon. So you want to figure out what the child is interested in. And you could also do it for high school, right? It may not be something as visual as that, but sometimes they need visual aids to see that they're earning that reward, right? Whether it's a sticker, it's a sticker or a check mark, or something that I made that was tangible that she can take off with Velcro and place onto another chart. That helps them to visualize, I'm getting closer to my goal, right? Like us, we get closer to our payday and we're like, yes, payday's coming. Some of us are like, payday's coming, but I know my bills are going to be paid. I may not see it, but my bills will be paid, right? So at least we're looking forward to that paycheck, right? Our payoff at the end of the day. So anxiety, is lessened for the student with ADHD, and they're rewarded for whatever it is that they put the effort into, right? So you're trying to change behaviors by rewarding them, right? We're helping them. So for example, maybe we're using one of their organizational skills or a few of their organizational skills. You might say, okay, you were able to, this child, you're talking to the child was able to organize their binders and get to class on time, or have their work ready and ready to hand in every period of the day. You give them a reward for that, right? They're no longer losing their things because I'm going to get a reward for doing something that I'm supposed to do anyways, but I'm doing it because I know I'm looking forward to that. So they're going to make a more conscious effort to earn that reward, right? Same thing as for maybe their work is really, really messy. I had a teacher when I was in grade, I think it was like grade 7, and my handwriting was so messy. So messy. Like if you see my handwriting now, you're going to know that I practiced. I practiced a lot. And every time I did my work and it was a mess, he would hand it back to me and say, rewrite it. And I'd be like, oh, man, I got to rewrite my work. So he would make me rewrite it and I would rewrite it. He says, I need to see it neat, right? And skip lines and and all of that stuff. So I did it. As I got into high school, I took more pride in my writing. And then I would, I entered into this, we had a calligraphy class. So I learned how to use the pen, the calligraphy pen. And now, without even using the calligraphy pen, I am writing in calligraphy, right? Very, very neat. So encourage students to do better. Encourage your children to do better. At home, you can use that same incentive system where you're putting it up on the wall and you're giving them stickers. You're rewarding them for something they need to do. For example, kids with ADHD, they tend to have sometimes their space is messy because they're always losing things and looking for them. You can do a reward system for them to clean up their spaces. All right. Johnny, you cleaned up your room in the morning, you made your bed, and then you, in the afternoon, you were able to, right, you're conditioning them. Yes. Skitter, I was trying to figure out who the therapist was, right? The therapist that did the experiments, right? So it's proven through therapy and through theory, that these things can happen. It's just all about practice, 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 right? Getting back to the chart on the wall. See me, I think I have ADHD. Remember, I told you that. I can focus on a lot of things at different times, but that's something that I taught my brain to do, focus on different things at the same time, right? But I get distracted really easily. So back to the chart on the wall, the child can earn those rewards if they are achieving those tasks, right? So make up your bed. I've done that for parents as well, where I make an at-home chart and I say, this is what you need to do. So you're going to check it off. When you get home, you have to take your school clothes off. Those things go in the dirty clothes. You put on your new home clothes, and then you get a snack, maybe watch some TV, and then you do your homework. And each thing that they do, each task that they do, they're checking off on a checklist, right? You're giving them some ownership and responsibility for their actions, okay? So winding down the show, if there's any questions that anyone wants to ask, there's a few minutes left in the show. If you want to ask any questions, please feel free to do that. And I'm also reminding you to please follow me on Minds in Motion Wellness on YouTube, like and subscribe. Also, TDN on YouTube, TDN TV on YouTube, like and subscribe there as well. And I want to say thank you to all the viewers on TikTok, on YouTube, Facebook, and on Roku for following and for paying attention and tuning in to Minds in Motion on wellness. Next week, I don't have a guest. Don't have a topic just yet. It's a new podcast series that I'm starting, and I'm just really thinking of things that parents and educators need to know about how to work with their children and how to have better relationships with them. So thank you for tuning in. Once again, my name is Jewel. Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you saw, shoot me a message. Send a like in the chat. I appreciate the like, Neto. Thank you so much, and have a good night. See you next week on Minds in Motion. 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.